Hi. Wow, thank you. Thank you. What's up? I haven't even said anything. You guys are killing me up here. Wow, I'm so glad to be back. It's been a pretty wild couple of months for me. I think it's been 10 weeks since I've stood before you, and one of the things that I keep thinking about in just church life is that there's people who have started attending Calvary over the last 2 months, and have no idea who I am, and every week, whoever, because I watch all the services, and so when I was at home and on Sunday, and so they'd be like, hey, Pastor Bob has a gift for you if you're here for the first time, and I'm thinking like people here, like they've been like their fourth week, and they're like, who is this Pastor Bob character that they keep talking about? And so anyway, so hi, my name's Bob. It's really nice to meet you, and I'm the senior pastor here at Calvary, and I had a heart attack on November 13th, and I was in my cardiologist's office doing a stress test because I hadn't been feeling well for the previous couple of months, and so they did a whole battery of tests, and I think I told you, like, when I went to go get my calcium score and funny things that happened, and so, but I was in the office doing the stress test, and the last part of the stress test, they put you on a treadmill, and then they start inclining the treadmill, they start speeding it up because they're trying to get your heart rate up. And so I'm running on the treadmill, and I start having like serious chest pain. And people ask me, like, when you say chest, like, what do you mean by chest pain? You mean like pressure? And I mean like somebody put my chest in a vice and just started squeezing. And I told the nurses, like, hey, I don't feel well, my chest hurts, and their response was, don't stop. You've got to hit this number. And so there's, like whatever, 85, there's some number you got to hit, and I'm at like 82, and then, so they're like, don't stop, you're almost there, and there's like this Cuban nurse, dale papi, tú puedes, and so there's like, that lady is in the mix, and so finally, I hit the number. I have an IV, so they put like this dye for contrast that they're going to do another X-ray thing and whatever. And but I get off the treadmill and I'm sitting down. I'm trying to catch my breath. And it's like 10 minutes. I'm trying to catch my breath. And the cardiologist comes in. He says, "Listen, I think I'm going to send you to the ER because based on this and all the tests that you've taken, this doesn't look good." And I start fighting with him. And I'm like, "Doctor, please, doctor to doctor." Doctor to doctor, let's not do this. And I said to him, like, listen, I'm supposed to be on a plane to San Diego tomorrow. And if you understand the unnatural love that I have of Southern California, and I had gotten invited to, Calvary Chapel is part of a movement of a couple thousand churches. And so I got invited to a planning meeting for Calvary churches. And so this is like the first time I ever got invited to this planning meeting, and I was like, nothing is going to stop me from going to this meeting. And sure enough, there was something, death. And so, anyway, so the doctor, the cardiologist, is like, Pastor, you're not going to San Diego. Here is the order. I want you to don't get in your car. Just walk downstairs and give this to the person at reception in the ER, and they're going to admit you. So I'm walking down to the ER, and while I'm walking there, I call my wife, and I'm like, hey, sweetie, I had kind of a weird episode at the cardiologist. I had like a lot of chest pain, so they're admitting me to the ER, and she says, I'm on my way. And so I'm at Memorial, but that's the Memorial by the mall in Pembroke Pines. So my wife is so freaked out over this, she drives to Memorial Miramar, which is right down the street from here. And so, which, by the way, that's where all my kids were born. I mean, if we go to the hospital, that's where we go. Now, the part I'm going to tell you is not funny. It's hilarious, but it's not funny. So just, be ready. And so Carrie gets to the hospital. And she gets to reception at ER, and she's like, I'm here to see Robert Franquez. And they're like, we have no record of him at the hospital. And she's like, oh no, I'm too late. He died. And so the whole time I'm watching her on Life 360, I'm like, why is she at the other hospital? So I call her to find out what's taking so long. And right as she's like, he's dead, then I call. Like, it's like, like the movie The Ring. And so, and then the phone rings and it's me, and it's like it all comes together. She's like, I'm at the wrong hospital, am I? Aren't I? And I'm like, yes, you are. And she's like, okay. So finally, she gets over. Like I said, not funny, but hilarious. And so she gets to the ER, and Carrie shows up, and they let her in, and then the nurse that's there, that's putting the IV in me, she says, hey, Carrie walks out to call the staff to pray and just to tell them what's going on with me. Like, hey, whatever Pastor Bob has on his schedule, cancel it. And so anyway, so the nurse says, hey, your wife is in the hallway crying. And I'm like, yeah, she's reaching out to my staff to tell them what's going on. She's like, oh, your staff, do you have a company? And I said, no, I'm actually a pastor. And then she looks at my little bracelet. She's like, you're Pastor Bob. I go to your church. And I'm like, well, nice to meet you. And she's like, it said Robert Franquez. I didn't know who that was. And I'm like, yeah, and I explained the whole thing about nicknames. And then we talked about some stuff she's going through. And so then my wife comes in, and I'm waiting for a test that they're going to do. And so I tell Carrie, I'm like, hey, can I tell you something weird? And she says, weirder than all this? And I said, a little bit. And she said, sure. And I said, so last night I had a dream that I went to the cardiologist's office for my stress test and had a heart attack. And that they sent me to the ER so I could have surgery. And she's like, what do you think it means? And I said, nothing. I didn't have a heart attack. And now, here's something you need to know about me. So I was born in the 70s but raised in the 80s. And so everything up until about 2 months ago, everything that I knew about heart attacks, I learned from the television show Sanford and Son. Okay? That was everything I knew. And if you're a little younger, you don't know this. But the show Sanford and Son is this guy and his son that own a junkyard that basically is where they live. And every episode, something happens that's such a crisis that Fred Sanford, the dad, he grabs his chest, he puts out his hand, and he says, Elizabeth, this is the big one. I'm coming to see you. And so, because I didn't grab my chest, put my arm out, and say, whatever family members I have there, hey, I'm coming to see you, because of that, I thought I was good. Thought I wasn't having a heart attack. Well, it turns out there are symptoms. I just didn't know what any of them were, because once again, they never portrayed them on that TV show / documentary, Sanford and Son. So anyway, and so I get admitted to the hospital, a memorial, and the next morning, the cardiologist comes to visit me with the PA, and he says to me, Pastor, I'm not a Christian. We've talked about this. I don't believe the same way as you, but of this I'm sure. Somebody's looking out for you because you had a heart attack in my office. We had you wired up. We watched the whole thing happen on the computer. And that's when I knew the dream was God preparing me for what was to come. And now there's so much more to the story that honestly, I don't have enough time even, if I told part of the story in each service, maybe 3 hours would give me enough time. But of this, I can be sure, and that I want to just testify to all of you that the Lord used that dream to save my life. And the surgeon at Memorial said he wouldn't do the surgery, the triple bypass that I needed. He said he wouldn't do it. He said I was too high risk. And he's like, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put 10 stents in you, and we'll just see what happens. That'll buy you 10 years, and then we'll work from there. And I'm thinking, like, I don't know that I feel comfortable with this cavalier attitude. And like, if we were talking about another person, I might feel better. But since we're talking about me, I'm really not that comfortable with this. And so, anyway, that led me through a whole series of circumstances and amazing people in this church that allowed me to get the film of all the pictures of my heart over to Cleveland Clinic, with one of the best surgeons in the country, who agreed to do this high-risk surgery that was the surgery that saved my life. And, a few months ago, probably a few weeks before I had the heart attack, a little kid came up to me after the service with his parents, and they're like, "Hey, my son has a question for you. Could you answer?" I said, "Sure." And he said, "Pastor Bob, do you get nervous when you speak?" And I said, I used to when I was younger. And I said, but now, standing here and teaching is the place where I feel most like myself. And from the moment that I got admitted to the ER and the moment that I found out that I was going to have surgery, my goal in every minute of every day has been to get better so that I could be here doing the thing that God had created and called me to do. So I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to all of you for all of your prayers. I can't tell you how many people in this church reached out to me and said that they were fasting the day of my surgery. And even those of you that didn't fast, that prayed, I appreciate it. I don't love you as much as the people who skipped dinner, but I still think you're okay. And but no, I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. But I want to share some things with you, and I'm so grateful where we are in the book of Daniel, because if I could pick any text, I think this is one of the texts that I would have really looked at to teach. Because, listen, trials and challenges, difficulties are part of life. Being a Christian doesn't exempt us from difficulties. And whether we're going to have difficulties or problems is not something that we get to control. But the part that we get to control is our attitude during the trial, and if we're going to trust God through the trial. And so, once again, the text that we're going to look at today is a pretty famous one, right? Daniel in the lion's den. And the thing is that most of us have heard the story in kind of like the children's Bible kind of way, but it's really very deep and kind of dark in some places. But the story of Daniel in the lion's den is really a story about Daniel's faithfulness to God. And then, in turn, the story of God's faithfulness to Daniel. It's about how God makes and creates a man and woman of God, and how we see that their faith is real. Men of God, women of God are forged in difficulty, and they prove their faith by remaining faithful even when they're put in difficult circumstances. So we're going to start in chapter 6 of Daniel. We're going to start in verse 1, and here's what we read. It says, "It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps, to be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one, that the satraps might give account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. So the governors and satraps sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find no charge or fault, because he was faithful, nor was there any error or fault in him. Then these men said, 'We shall not find any charge against this Daniel unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God.' And so those governors and satraps thronged before the king and said thus to him, 'King Darius, live forever. All the governors of the kingdom, the administrators and satraps, the counselors and advisors, have counseled together to establish a royal statute and make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish a decree and sign the writing, so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which does not alter.' Therefore, King Darius signed the written decree." If you pause there and give me your attention, there's 3 things we're going to look at when it speaks to faith and how men and women of God are developed. Number 1, if you're a note taker, is that a man of God has an excellent spirit. Now, I know it's been a while since we looked at chapter 5, but if you're kind of following the chronology, what's happening here is like a year to 2 years after the fall of Babylon. So the end of chapter 5, the Babylonian kingdom falls. Now we got a year or 2 later, and the Medo-Persian Empire has taken over. And this, once again, is all part of the interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Remember Nebuchadnezzar, if you remember in chapter 2, was the head of gold that would eventually give way to the arms and chest of silver, which were the Medo-Persians. And so we learn that Daniel goes back into public service after 20 years of being out of the public eye and becomes now, as we read, one of the top 3 officials in the Medo-Persian kingdom. And so the question is, why? Why choose Daniel as a leader when you've got lots of people to choose from? So just to give you a little bit of understanding, number one, Daniel knows everyone. Daniel has been serving in the region of Babylon since he was 15 years old. So he's been serving for like 50 years. And so he has this reputation of being faithful. Also, just a year or two previously, he had interpreted the writing on the wall to King Belshazzar that said that the Medo-Persians were going to take over. So he has this reputation of not particularly being on the side of the Babylonians, which also is helpful for the new guys that are taking over. Second, Daniel wasn't Babylonian. He was Jewish. So he has no allegiance to the Babylonians, and he isn't likely to start some kind of uprising or oppose the new king. And the third, which I think is the most important, is that when Cyrus shows up, remember, Darius takes over the city, and then Cyrus comes in about a week or two later with this kind of the pomp and circumstance as now the king over the entire empire. Then he shows up in Babylon, and history records something for us that's really important. So the Roman Empire, by the way, I know I'm fast forwarding, but the Roman Empire were obsessed with historical records. And even with the people that they conquered. So one of the things that they did is that they hired a historian whose name was Josephus. In the first century, Josephus gets hired by the Romans to write a chronicle of the history of the Jews and whatever battles or wars that they were in. In fact, you can buy a copy of Josephus's writings, which are the Antiquities of the Jews and the Wars of the Jews. And so in the Antiquities of the Jews, he talks about this moment when Cyrus enters Babylon, and that it's Daniel that meets him and has a copy of the scroll of Isaiah and says, Daniel says to him, O king, we've been waiting for you. And so let me read you a passage from Isaiah chapter 44 that he presents to King Cyrus. But he says, it says, I am the Lord, the maker of all things, who stretches out the heavens, who spreads out the earth by myself, who foils the signs of the false prophets and makes fools of diviners, who overthrows the learning of the wise and turns it into nonsense, who carries out the words of his servants and fulfills the predictions of his messengers, who says of Jerusalem, it'll be inhabited, of the towns of Judah you shall be rebuilt, and of their ruins I will restore them, who says to the watery deep, be dry, and I will dry up your streams, who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and will accomplish all that I please, and will say of Jerusalem, he shall be rebuilt, and of the temples, let its foundation be laid. Listen, God, in the book of Isaiah, names Cyrus 150 years before he's born. And as you can imagine, Cyrus isn't Jewish. He doesn't worship the Jewish God. But he's so moved that the Jews have his name in their scriptures that he allows them to go home. And within a year of this, 50,000 Jews go home, led by Ezra. If you're not familiar with that story, Ezra has a book out. You can read it. And the temple gets rebuilt and the city of Jerusalem. And so just so you know, there's no confusion. So the king over the entire realm is Cyrus. But Darius was the one who captured the city for Cyrus. And so the region of Babylon is controlled by Darius. And he becomes essentially the viceroy for Cyrus and operates with the authority of a king over the region of Babylon. But I want you to notice something, and this is what I want to park on for just a couple of minutes, and that is, I want you to see how this is how Daniel gets the position, but what causes Daniel to rise above everyone else is because the Bible says this, that he had an excellent spirit in verse 3. Now, what does that mean? Well, we get some clues throughout the passage that we read that tells us what does it mean when a man or woman of God has an excellent spirit. Number one, if you're a note taker, it's in your notes, is that an excellent spirit has spiritual substance. Spiritual substance. That is, Daniel was so committed to God that everyone knew it. He wasn't a secret believer. He was a believer who was serious about his faith. In fact, his enemies knew that the only way to trap him was through his faith. And by the way, when you're that committed to God, you're likely to have a few enemies. And that means having a few enemies means that you stand for something. So listen, if you're living for God with all your heart, trust me, there are going to be people who hate that. And listen, and by the way, Jesus said that. He said that there's going to be people that hate you. Why? Just because of your faith in him. And so why? Because the way that you're living convicts them. And so here's what you do about that. Nothing. That's their problem. You just keep living the way God is telling you to live. But Daniel's faith was not superficial. His faith defined who he was. Now let me tell you how it kind of works for us. We have a tendency to judge ourselves not on our actions. We have a tendency to judge ourselves on our intentions. You know, I meant to do that. I didn't do it. But the fact that I meant to do it is basically as good as if I did it. Like, it's really not. And so, and I'm telling you, Christians, I hear this all the time. It's like, well, they do something that's like totally contrary to the Bible, what they know they're supposed to do. And they're like, but I know God knows my heart. Like, as if it's some kind, like, dude, we're not playing Monopoly. This isn't your get out of jail free card. Like this, God knows my heart, as if that's like a catch-all. And by the way, God does know your heart. Let me give you a little commentary on that. In Jeremiah 17, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I didn't know that verse. Well, now you do. It's like your heart is not doing great. Trust me, as a guy who's, dealing with stuff. And so, but we need to be careful. We need to be careful that we don't just talk about doing what's right, but we actually do the right thing. And I love what Jesus says in John 13. He says, if you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. Because listen, we don't give each other points for our intentions. We do it to ourselves, but we don't give each other points. Like when you run into somebody, like, oh, I meant to call you. Like, that doesn't warm my heart. Like, what does that even mean? Like, I meant to call you. Like, that means, like, I was going to call you, and then I found something better to do. It's like, that's not. So, if you've been around Calvary, I've shared this before, but there is a girl I went to high school with who is convinced that I stood her up for the prom. She's convinced. But I did not, by the way, but she's convinced I did. And so, listen, I get it. I understand why she's mad. I didn't do it, but I understand why she's mad. I mean, imagine on prom night, you're like waiting at the curb for the limo to show up. And by the way, if she would have known me in a high school, you think I'm springing for a limo? Like, you're going to be on the handlebars on my bike, So anyway, so nonetheless, she would not, I'm like, I did not ask you she's convinced I asked her to the prom. By the way, I didn't even go to the prom. It's not like I went with somebody else. I didn't even go. I'm a musician. That wasn't my scene. And so I tried talking to her, and we were like, I was friends with her, but I didn't like see her that way. And so anyway, and I tried to tell her that I wouldn't intentionally hurt her. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Whatever she hates me. Not hated. It's continual. And I'm telling you that because I graduated from high school 30 years ago. And she, about, I don't know, whatever it is, more than 10 years ago, she friended me on Facebook. And I'm like, okay, it's over. And she messaged me, and she's like, it's been 20 years, and I still hate you. And so I'm just telling you, intentions mean very little, okay? And by the way, when I had my surgery, I heard from everyone. I figured I'd hear from Calvary people. Every pastor in this area that I know and don't know reached out to me. And I heard from everybody. I heard from everybody I went to high school with. I heard from everybody I went to middle school with, except her. And everybody except her. Why? She was rooting for the Grim Reaper. And so she heard the news and was like, dang it. And this was bad news. So anyway. And but listen, an excellent spirit, here's what it has. Not just the intention, but the action that people can see and experience. Here's the second thing, is that an excellent spirit has the right attitude. In verse 2, it says that Daniel distinguished himself above everyone else. How did he do it? By working hard. Can I tell you something that so often Christians think, like, oh, the way that you're going to know I'm a Christian is, because of the Bible verses that I post in my cubicle or whatever. It's like, I have a hunk if you love Jesus bumper sticker. By the way, we don't need to give people more reasons to honk. Just FYI. And if honking means you love Jesus, then all of South Florida is saved. Because everybody's honking for it. So, and so now let me tell you this. So let me show you this picture. I love this picture. So this is Martin Luther. if you're not familiar with him. Martin Luther was a German monk, theologian, university professor, church reformer, whose ideas in 1517 inspired the Protestant Reformation. Although you look at him and you think you'd find him in like a non-corporate coffee shop, quoting poetry, talking about the importance of like fair trade coffee beans. But anyway, but that's just how people looked. And but his ideas and his theology that literally changed Western civilization. And but here's one something that he wrote. He wrote, the Christian shoemaker does his duty not by putting little crosses on the shoes, but by making good shoes, because God is interested in good craftsmanship. I love that. That is the way that we live, the way that we conduct ourselves speaks to everyone about what we believe. The Apostle Paul would say it this way in Colossians chapter 3, and whatever you do, do it heartily, as to the Lord, not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. Now, Paul is saying this not just as a preacher, not just as a church planter, not just as an apostle, but he's saying it also as someone who was a tent maker as his side hustle when he was out there starting churches. And he didn't want people to think that he was only working for God when he was preaching, but he was working for God when he was making tents as well. And I'm telling you, something amazing happens when we bypass our immediate boss and realize that we're working for God no matter what we do. You know what happens? When we realize that I'm working for God, our work changes, our attitude changes, the words that we use change, our punctuality changes, all that. And you know what happens when you're on time, do great work, have a great attitude, and speak good words to other people? You get promoted. That's why Solomon tells us in Proverbs 22, do you see a man who excels in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before unknown men. So friends, maybe 2026 is the year that we decide that we're going to excel at our work. And we're going to see the faithfulness of God as it leads in our work, being faithful to him and then him being faithful to us. Daniel was promoted because he was very good at his job and used that faithfulness. God gave him greater opportunities. Here's the last thing, and then we're going to move on. But an excellent spirit has strong commitment. Daniel was faithful, and that's why he was in an exalted position. If you and I want to reach the highest levels of life, we've got to be faithful, because there is no substitute for continued faithfulness day in and day out. Many times we want to show up strong on the big days, when we think, oh, that's the day it really matters. But see, that's not how it works. The way it works is it takes faithfulness in the everyday to be strong on the big days. I mean, if I can use another example from the Old Testament, David didn't kill Goliath out of the blue. In fact, if you read the story, he had seasons of preparation where God was training him for the big day, preparing him for the big day. When he's explaining to King Saul, when Saul's like, you can't kill this guy. I mean, you're just a kid. He's been in battle since before you were born. And David talks about how he was in the field keeping his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear would try to steal one of the sheep, that David would attack the lion or bear or kill it. Now listen, I don't know a lot about the sheep industry, but I've got to guess that for David's dad, Jesse, that he has to have understood that a few sheep would get eaten by wild animals. And within like the financial structure of the sheep business, there's got to be a line in their P&L report that there's like a line item of loss due to accidental death or like first-degree murder at the hand of another animal. And like David's dad isn't going to say anything because, hey, we lost a couple sheep. The sheep aren't going to say anything that David ran away from the lion. What are they going to say? David's a bad boy. So, you know, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And so, but here's what did happen, is that moments of private faithfulness led to David's public exaltation. Friends, we need to understand how that equation works, that private faithfulness is always what leads to public exaltation. See, here's how Jesus puts it in Matthew 25. Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I'll make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. David became the champion of Israel because he was willing to trust God when no one was looking. And that led to the greatest victories in his life. Friends, if we run away from the everyday challenges, we cannot expect for courage to materialize when the giants show up. Instead, What we do is we are faithful when the problems are small, and that's what causes us to now trust God as the problems get bigger. And so whether it's David's life or Daniel's life, we see that preparation in the little things now leads to opportunities to serve and be in leadership. So they make this decree with the king. Look what happens in verse 10. Now, when Daniel knew, by the way, he knew that the writing was signed, he went home. And in his upper room, with his windows open towards Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since the early days. That phrase is underlined twice in my Bible. And then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. And they went before the king and spoke concerning the king's decree. Have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any god or man within 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? And the king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which does not alter. So they answered and said before the king, that Daniel, who's one of the captives of Judah, does not show true regard to you, O king, or for the decree that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. And the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself, set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, and labored until the going down of the sun to deliver him. Then these men approached the king and said to the king, know, O king, that it's the law of the Medes and the Persians that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed. So the king gave the command. And they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke, saying to Daniel, your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. Then a stone was brought and laid in the mouth of the den. And the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signets of his lords, that the purpose concerning Daniel might not be changed. Now, if you pause there, give me your attention. Second thing, we talk about a man or a woman of God. Here's the second thing, is that a man of God obeys God. Now, to get into the background of this law, we have to understand kind of what's going on. The Medo-Persian Empire was a little bit different than the Babylonian Empire. The Babylonian Empire is what is called an absolute monarchy. That is, the king's word was the law. The king could establish a law right now, change his mind 20 minutes later, then go back to the first law an hour later. It's like it didn't matter. Whatever the king said was absolute. For the Medo-Persians, it was a little bit different. They were a monarchy, but they were a monarchical autocracy. And that is that the king could establish any law he wanted. But once that law was established, that law was even higher than the position of the king. Because no law, even the king, could not change the law once it's been established. And so this is what's happening here. This group of officials are tricking the king into signing this law for the explicit purpose of entrapping Daniel and killing him. But I want you to notice that once Daniel knew the law, he knew what was going down. And once that law was signed, he then opened his windows and prayed towards Jerusalem 3 times a day, as was his custom since he was young. Now, I want you to understand, this wasn't like a cool practice that he decided. This was a command of God. Because when Solomon dedicated the temple, and this is in 2 Chronicles chapter 6, it's also in 1 Kings chapter 8, and he dedicates the temple, he prays this beautiful prayer, and it's worthy of its own study. In fact, there's a dissertation out by a really good guy who spends a good amount of time talking about this. It's a different topic. Anyway, so... but I do talk about that in my dissertation a little bit, because anyway, that's another time. So, but he says something in the prayer that Daniel picks up on. Let me read you a portion of the prayer, just a few verses. He says this, talking about Israel. He says, Solomon says, when they sin against you, and there is no one who does not sin, and you become angry with them and give them over to the enemy, who takes them captive to a land far or near, and if they have a change of heart in the land where they're held captive and repent and plead with you in the land of their captivity and say, we have sinned, we have done wrong and acted wickedly. And if they turn back to you with all their heart and soul and the land of their captivity where they were taken and pray towards the land that you gave their ancestors and towards the city you have chosen and toward the temple that I have built for your name, then from heaven, your dwelling place, hear their prayer and their pleas and uphold their cause and forgive your people who have sinned against you. Now, here's the thing that I find so powerful, is that Daniel could have prayed towards Jerusalem, towards the temple in his house. He didn't have to open the windows. And he could have prayed in the corner somewhere. And in fact, we could find a Bible verse, like you should pray in the corner so nobody can see you, right? And by the way, this is only for 30 days. And, I'm sure he could have cooked up a reason. I don't want to open the windows. I don't want to catch a chill. So let's keep the windows closed. But that's not how Daniel lived his life. Daniel's life was defined by his faith. And the only way that Daniel knows how to live is with all the windows open, so that everybody can see him praying, because that was his custom since he was a young man. And friends, we need to be living with our windows open. That is, living in such a way so that everyone sees our faith and that our faith impacts our daily decisions and actions. Listen, Paul, the apostle, when he writes his second letter to the Corinthians, there were people who questioned the apostolic authority that Paul had, and they were like, maybe you should send us some letters of recommendation so that we can trust you. And here's Paul's response to that in 2 Corinthians. He says, you yourselves are our letter, written on our hearts, known and read by everyone. You show that you are a letter from Christ, the result of our ministry, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts. Here's the thing that Paul says. You want a letter? Here's a letter. That entire church, the church at Corinth, that's my letter. And here's the thing that's so beautiful. It's not just that church that is the letter. This church is the letter as well. And not only this church as a whole, but each of us individually are a letter from Jesus to the world. That your life is a letter. That is, it's the tale of how you're being transformed by Jesus. To see Jesus do his good work in and through your life as you trust him. And here's the question. That letter, that story, what kind of story is it? Is it an epic adventure where you faced difficult circumstances but God delivered you? Is it a cautionary tale about what happens when we compromise and don't really trust God? Is it an instruction manual about what happens when you just step by step walk with God and do what he's telling you to do? As I've thought about my life over the last few months, I feel like my life is like this action comedy with a touch of a musical, because there's always weird things happening, but there's always somebody playing guitar in the background and in my house and everywhere. So when you're going to have major surgery, one of the things that happens is pretty much every discipline comes in. So whether it's the surgeon, whether it's the anesthesiologist, everybody comes in and they just tell you what their part. And so they kind of walk you through all of the portions of the surgery. And my surgery was long. My surgery ended up being about 8.5 hours, all in. And so, but one of the things that they told me, and one of the things that I was a little bit nervous about, if I'm being honest, is they said that I was going to be intubated. And so, because I didn't know this, and I'm glad I didn't research this before, but, when you're having open heart surgery, they intubate you, and then when they crack your chest open and pull out your heart and kind of set it next to you, that's the thing I didn't realize. I didn't realize my insides were going to be outside. So that's a weird thing. And so then they're they're going to stop your heart because you can't work on something that's doing this all the time. So they stop your heart, and then the intubation is hooked up to a machine, and that's what's keeping you alive for the duration of the surgery. So anyway, but they told me, they're look, and I was asking all these questions about the intubation because I don't know, that just made me feel very uncomfortable. And I said, look, they said, look, after the surgery, a couple hours after your surgery, they're going to wake you up and they're going to ask you some questions. Just make sure you answer the questions correctly, and if you do, they'll remove the tubes. So after my surgery, I don't know what's going on, but they wake me up and they say, Mr. Franquist, can you hear me? I nod. Now here's the thing you got to understand. Cleveland Clinic is not just a hospital, it's a teaching hospital. So there's always a doctor and at least one student. And I'm telling you this, and forgive me if this is TMI, but there's always a crowd when, so there's I remember the day after my surgery, they're you should try to go to the bathroom. I'm like, sure. So I get up and I kind of hobble to the bathroom, and there's 4 of us in there. And I'm like, guys, I'm not trying to be difficult, but this isn't going to work. And so I need at least 3 of us to leave. And I don't even care which 3. I'm going to be one of them. We ain't going to work with 4 of us in here. And so they're like, okay, we'll step outside. And then the door was open. I'm like, guys, I don't think you really understand what's going on here. I suffer from stage fright. And so anyway, and then like, well, we'll turn our back, but the door has to be open some. And I'm like, we're done here. We'll try again tomorrow. And I'll hold it. And so anyway, so it's a teaching hospital. So it's so bright. They have all the lights on, and I have my eyes closed because I'm still so groggy from the anesthesia. And so I hear, and I don't know if the guy is next to her or behind her, I don't know. But I hear a guy, which I'm assuming is a doctor, telling this girl, I'm assuming is a student, what commands or questions to ask me. And so the guy starts saying, like, ask him if he can cough. And it's like, Mr. Franquist, can you cough? Whatever. Mr. Franquist, can you, turn your head? I turn my head. And then, Mr. Franquist, can you raise your right hand? There's my hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth? Yes, I do. And so anyway, I'm doing like, can you nod, yes or no? Yeah, I do all that. And so then he's telling her what to tell me. And so then the guy says to the girl, and he says, okay, now you can talk to Brandon and ask if he wants to extubate. And so I'm assuming, I don't know this for sure, but I'm assuming that Brandon is the supervisor for all like tubes. And so, he's just like got like all the hoses in his department. And so, so she like, and it's so uncomfortable, and I'm like really irritated by it. I'm trying to stay calm. And so I hear the door open and then close. And then a minute or two later, she comes back in. And she says to the guy, she says, Brandon says to extubate him. And then the guy says, okay, now you have a decision to make, because Brandon has a tendency to forget what he says. So you have to decide whether you want him to sign the order or do you want to risk it and just do it. And I'm thinking, like, am I listening to internal hospital politics? And is that what's going on here? And so I just start banging on the side of the bed. And I'm like, because I can't talk. And they're like, oh, just one moment, sir. And then I hear the door open, and it closes. And then I don't know how long it was, a minute or two. I'm so out of it at the time. And then, but I hear her the door open. She comes back in, and she says, so the other thing is, so I got to tell you this other thing, and that is that they're like very nervous with me. This is what I found out later. Like, everybody was nervous because apparently right after the surgery, when I got back to the room, back to the ICU room, I tried to get out of bed and rip everything off. And so, which by the way is weird, because when I came out of anesthesia and they wanted me to get up, I was like, I don't want to get up. I'm in a lot of pain. But apparently I just was, whatever. And so, so my wife was there, and she was telling me it took 4 people to restrain me and they were not winning, by the way. And I had this reputation on the ICU floor. I was known as the strong guy. And they're like, have you seen the guy in ICU room 2? The strong guy? And which, by the way, like, I've never been called the strong guy in my life. So I was like really into it. I was like, hey, Mr. Frank, you've probably heard of me. And so I was super into it. And so anyway, and the only thing that calmed me down is that I'm like winning with these 4 people. And then my wife came over and she put her hand on my head and she started talking to me. And that's the only thing that calmed me down. I was like, I don't know if you ever saw the movie Age of Ultron. I was like the Hulk in Age of Ultron. I'm like, hey, big guy, the sun's getting real low. I was like, that was like my situation. And so anyway, after banging on the bed, Brandon finally signs off. And I'm like, let's go, Brandon. Hadn't said that phrase in a while. And sorry. That phrase has been out of style for a year or so, but I wanted to bring it back. So anyway, but he signs off. They sign off, and then they're like, okay, just breathe out. And I was like, and dude, they did, and like, that was weird. That was a weird feeling. And then, because everybody's trying to keep me calm, they're like, who knows what the strong guy's going to do next? Just do what he says, and then we'll get out of it. But here's the point, right? Here's the point, is that what kind of story do you want to tell? You're not powerless to decide what kind of story you want your life to be. I mean, you can choose to make your life a story that's worth telling, and that in your decisions impact what kind of story it is. Is it a story of faith and trust? Is it an adventure? Is it inspirational and powerful? Listen, you and I have one life, so make it a story worth telling. So they've got everything set. They toss Daniel in. Look what happens next in verse 18. This is where we're going to draw it to a close. It says, "Now the king went to the palace and spent the night fasting, and no musicians were brought before him. Also his sleep went from him. Then the king arose early in the morning and went in haste to the lion's den. And when he came to the den, he cried out with a lamenting voice, and the king spoke, saying to Daniel, 'Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?' Then Daniel said to the king, 'O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done nothing wrong before you.' Now the king was exceedingly glad for him and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. And so Daniel was taken out of the den, and no injury was found on him whatsoever, because he believed in his God. And the king also gave the command and brought those men who had accused Daniel and cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives. And the lions overpowered them, broke all their bones in pieces before they ever came to the bottom of the den. And then King Darius wrote to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men must tremble before the God of Daniel. He is the living God and steadfast forever. His kingdom is one which shall not be destroyed. His dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders and in heaven and on earth. And he has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. And this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian." Last thing in your notes, and then we're going to make our descent here. But that is that a man of God experiences God's power. I love what the king says. He's not sure if God's powerful enough to save Daniel. So he's like, "Daniel, did God save you?" By the way, this is like great comedic opportunity. I mean, Daniel could have been like, "Sorry, king, it didn't work out. I died last night." By the lights, the circle of life. But no, they didn't do that. But instead, Daniel says, God sent his angel and shut the mouth of the lions. Now, you have to understand the miraculous part of this is that these lions were bred to be ferocious. And the way they did that is they were kept in a state of near starvation, so that whenever anything fell in, it didn't last, as you see when people get sent in. Now, you read what happens to the other governors and those leaders that tricked the king, and you're like, man, that just seems a little harsh. I mean, wipe them out and their families. Now, you got to understand is that the king's not a believer. He appreciates Daniel, and he seems to appreciate Daniel's God, but he's not a believer. So it shouldn't, shock us when people who aren't Christians don't act Christian. The second thing is, this was the law. This is how Persian law worked. If you were found guilty of a capital crime, your entire family paid for it. There's a Greek historian named Herodotus. In fact, we have a picture of Herodotus. I've talked about him before. Herodotus is called the father of history because he started writing. He's also got the best abs in the business. So that's why he looks like that. It's like, oh, we're going to do, this is back in my Abercrombie and Fitch days. And so that's his deal. But anyway, Herodotus talks about a Persian king that did this exact thing because this was a form of law that was called in Latin the lex talionis, which means the law of reciprocal justice. And that is that the punish should fit the crime. And so these two governors deceived the king, and they wanted Daniel killed. Well, now they're going to pay, and everybody around them is going to pay. There's a principle that I want to share with you, and it's a principle I've taught my kids since they were young. And that is, and I'm telling you, if you live by this, it'll change your life. But the person who honors God is honored by God. And this is a principle of spiritual life. Whatever area in your life that you honor God, he will honor you in return. So you want to honor God in your relationships, with your words, with your work, with your finances, with the gifts that God has given you. Whatever area of life you honor him, he will honor you. In fact, in 1 Samuel chapter 2, God says this, "I will honor those who honor me, but he who despises me will be disgraced." Now, there's a phrase that I love that I just want to talk about for a second before we close. That twice this is used, that the king uses speaking of Daniel. He says this, Daniel, the God whom you serve continually. Not the God that you serve occasionally, the God that you serve seasonally, the God that you serve half-heartedly. Instead, Daniel's continual faithfulness to God led to God's faithfulness to him and delivering him from the den of lions. Listen, it says that Daniel believed God. You know, that's different than believing in God. Believing in God means that you believe that there is a God in heaven who created everything. Believing God means that you take hold of the promises of God and you trust the promises of God and the commands of God and live like they're true because they are. And then, here's what Daniel believed, and maybe this is what he was thinking when he spent the night with the lions in Psalm 35. Lord, how long will you look on? Rescue me from their destructions, my precious life from the lions. I will give you thanks in the great assembly. I will praise you among many people. He believed that the promises of God could save him, and God did. Friends, listen, some of us are in the lion's den, and we need the promises of God to hold on to. Now, let me just tell you this. Psalm 73 is a psalm that I know really well. It's a psalm that I have taught. It's a psalm that I've studied. I think when I was doing my undergrad, I wrote a paper on Psalm 23, and yet there is a verse that I missed. And when I was sitting, and I've been in the process of reading the Psalms, all of them. And so the day before my surgery, I'm in the ICU, and this was my psalm the morning before my surgery. And I can't believe that I had this psalm that I knew so well, I had missed this verse. And here's what it says. David writes, my flesh and my heart fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. And that was my promise before, during, and after my surgery. My friends, listen, whatever lion you're facing today, be it a lion that's trying to divide your family, a financial lion that's trying to create chaos, a lion that's trying to derail your career, the God that we serve is our best bet at victory. In 1 Peter chapter 5, Peter says this, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. I want you to think about that for a minute. It says that the devil walks around like a lion. He isn't a lion. He's a fake lion, but he's trying to pass himself off as the real thing. Our God is the lion. In the book of Revelation, in chapter 5, John, the apostle, writes, he gets this heavenly vision and he says, then I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the scroll and loose its seals? No one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or look at it. So I wept much because no one was found worthy to open and read the scroll or look at it. But one of the elders said to me, do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David. He has prevailed to open the scroll and loose its 7 seals. My friends, the promise we have is that we're not alone. As with Daniel, he says, God sent his angel to stand with me. So we don't need to weep. We can stand with joy. Why? Because that lion, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, he's coming back. And he's going to make every wrong right. He's going to dry every tear and put away suffering, pain, and death. And just like Daniel walked out of that lion's den alive when he should have been dead, Jesus walked out of his den, right? The tomb where they laid him after he died. They're like, well, that's it. It's over. But when the women came and showed up on that first Easter Sunday morning, who was there to greet them? The angel who rolled the stone away. Friends, listen to me. These aren't interesting parallels to pique our curiosity. Instead, they are patterns that speak to the promise of a future reality, that the lion, our lion, is coming back, and everything is going to be different when he does. So I'm going to invite all of us to stand in these last few moments. But here's the amazing thing, is that change doesn't have to start in the future. It can start now. God can change your life starting today. Jesus can come into your life and transform your past by forgiving it. He can transform your present by giving you peace even when there's seeming chaos all around you. And he can transform your future by putting you on a brand new path. Listen, if we're being honest, some of us have tried everything. to get out of the lion's den. Some of us are in a lion's den of our own making, but now we can't get out. And so we've tried numbing ourselves with drugs or alcohol. We've spent money we didn't have to try to fix things. We've tried relationship after relationship, thinking that that would change things, and it didn't. Friends, listen to me. There's only one relationship that can change your life, and that's coming to know Jesus and allowing him to change you from the inside out. Friends, listen to me. I stand here as someone who, humanly speaking, shouldn't be here. Every doctor that I spoke to said, we don't really understand how you're still alive. With all the blockages that I had a heart attack, but somehow there was no damage to my heart, which that in of itself was a miracle. And that I was just like one more cardiac episode away from it being over. And yet through a whole series of circumstances, God has me here. Listen, Jesus saved me 32 years ago. But you know what I've realized in this whole situation? That God has been continually saving me over the years. And listen, and he wants to save you. And he wants to transform you. And he wants to forgive you because Jesus died for you and for me and for us. And he rose again. He wants to make your life different. But here's what it takes. You got to receive the gift. You got to embrace the work that he's done for you. And listen, I am absolutely convinced that there are some people here today that say, I've just kind of had enough. And I'd love it if someone could just open the door to the lion's den and allow me to be free. Jesus wants to set you free. And better than that, he wants to transform your life into something that you and I can't even fathom at this point right now. In a minute, the band is going to begin to sing. And here's what I'm going to invite you to do. I'm going to invite you wherever it is that you're standing in this room. I'm going to invite you to meet me here. And whether you're in this room or whether you're in the lobby and overflow, I want you to meet me here when they begin to sing, that you say, I'm saying yes to Jesus. I'm taking my first step with God in his direction. I want him to change my life because I can't go on living this way. I can't go on feeling this way. I can't go on doing things this way. Look, I'm surrendering. And that's all it takes. And if you'll do that, God can take care of the rest. So I'm going to invite you to meet me here and watch what God does when you surrender your life to him. Maybe you've been living, you're like, oh, I'm a believer, but I've been kind of doing my own thing. Maybe today's the day you need to come back to the Lord and say, God, I'm done being wishy-washy. I'm done being half-hearted. Today's the day of full commitment to you. So if you're ready, I want you to meet me here and watch what God can do in your life when you trust him. Zan, why don't you lead us?
Cause all I want is to live within your love, be undone by who you are. My desire is to know you deeper. Lord, I will open up again, throw my fears into the wind. I am desperate for a touch, cause all done by who you are. My desire is to know you deeper. Lord, I will open up again, throw my fears into the winds. I am desperate for a touch of heaven.
Yeah. God bless you guys. Coming up, come on. Come on, brother. We're going to wait for you. Yeah, come on up. Come on up. Listen, we're not going to have the band play again, but here's what I'm convinced of. If you're in this place where you're like, I probably should, but I don't know, and maybe, listen, if you feel God calling you, this is your moment. This is your first act of God speaking to you, leading you, wanting to direct you. And this is just the beginning of everything that God wants you to do. You know what you're going to be met with? Cheers and applause. And you know what the Bible says? That when one person turns to God, that there is a party in heaven for every person that makes a decision to follow Jesus. So listen, I'm going to invite you. I'm going to invite you to probably do the most courageous thing you've ever done in your life, and that is I'm just going to take a step forward to see what God has for me. You've got absolutely nothing to lose and everything to gain if God meets you in this place. I made this exact same decision 32 years ago, and my only regret is that I didn't do it sooner. So I'm going to give you one more moment. And by the way, if you invited someone, if you attend Calvary and you invited someone, just be like, hey, if you want to go up, let's go up together. Yeah, come on. God bless you guys. Yeah. Great decision. Great decision. Yeah, there we go. I knew it. Yeah. So listen, here's what I want to do. I want to pray for you, and I want to lead you in a simple prayer. And the prayer is not a magic formula. It's a prayer of commitment. And it's a prayer that when we pray in sincerity, God will meet us in this place. And God will transform us, and we can watch Him change us. I mean, this is the day, circle it on the calendar, that this is the day that everything began to change. So church, let's pray together. God, we want to thank you so much for your incredible love for us. And Lord, our prayer and our hope, I thank you for every precious person that's made a decision to come forward, that today was their day. And Lord, I'm asking that you'd meet them here, and that this would be the place where you begin the process of, that you forgive them, that you're so gracious and merciful to them, that you'd begin transforming them, that you'd give them a different vision for their future. So Lord, I pray that you do that work today. Those of you that have come forward, I'm going to invite you to repeat this prayer out loud. We're all going to pray it out loud together. Say, dear God, I come to you today, and I'm sorry for all my sins. But I thank you for Jesus, who died for me, that I might have life. I want to walk with you, starting right now. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Yeah. I'm going to tell you one more thing. When the service ends in just a moment, there's you're going to see an area that says Welcome Center. If you stop by there and say, I prayed with Pastor Bob, and they're going to give you a copy of this book. This is my gift to you. And this book really, it tells you a little bit about how I came to faith, but it explains this moment. And then what are the first few steps to take in your walk with God. And so once again, it's my gift to you, and we'd love to put it in your hands and help and encourage you in your walk with God. And so you can head over in that direction. And so for everybody else, hey, is it cool if we do this again next week? Yeah, I'd like that. So until then, my friends, I love you so much. I thank God for you. Have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for joining us today. If you made a decision to follow Jesus and begin a relationship with Him, congratulations. It's the best decision you're ever going to make. Now, you may be wondering, what's my next step? Where do I go from here? Here's what I want to encourage you to do. Go ahead and click on that first link below, and we'll send you this book. It's called Begin. It's written by Pastor Bob, and it's going to help you take those first steps on your new journey of faith. So remember, to stay up to date with everything happening here at Calvary, make sure you follow @MyCalvary on Instagram and Facebook. So until next time, we love you. We're praying for you. God bless you.